Okay, so reconvening for the council meeting for Monday, March 9th, 2020. Looking to council for any further disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof. Seeing none. That takes us to our formal planning meeting for the evening. That's official plan amendment number 25 and zone change application Z1818. Your Neighborhood Credit Union Limited for 164, 168 King Street South and 8 George Street. This is a formal public meeting to consider the thing I just said. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate register in the binder located at the desk at the rear of the council chambers. If there is more than one binder, which there is not, please make sure you are signing the appropriate one. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice is advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on February 20, 2020, and mailed or emailed on February 18, 2020, to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, to public agencies, to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting held on January 14, 2019, and to all persons who requested further notice.
Thank you. The city's planner, Rita Silak, will now give a brief overview of the application.
Thank you very much. Members of council, ladies and gentlemen, this is a formal public meeting for 164, 168 King Street South and 8 George Street. Official plan amendment number 25 and zoning bylaw amendment Z1818. The application was submitted by your Neighborhood Credit Union, represented here tonight by Trevor Hawkins of MHBC Planning. The subject site is located on the northeast corner of King Street South and George Street on the eastern edge of the Uptown. The site has a prominent location at the doorstep of the Uptown commercial core, which is located to the north of the site. The site is a 3-lot consolidation with 164 and 168 King Street South located within the Uptown Growth Center, while 8 George Street is located just outside of the primary node. The subject site is uniquely situated with frontage on George Street, King Street South, and internal King Street, with the LRT tracks running along King Street and the nearest LRT stop located just at the corner of Allen and King there. This is a conceptual perspective of the proposed development. The applicant is proposing to build an 8-story mixed-use building on the site containing 34 residential units, 581 square meters of commercial space, and 32 parking spaces. I should also mention that the initial proposal submitted by the applicant was for a 9-story mixed-use building with 36 units, 810 square meters of commercial area, and 36 parking spaces. This is a conceptual site plan of the proposed development. On the ground floor, the commercial or office space would address King Street South. The surface parking lot is proposed in behind the building along here in this area and back in here. Further, there is structured parking proposed underneath the cantilevered portion of the building in this area here. There are 3 access points proposed into the parking lot, one off of George, located right here, and 2 off of internal King, over here and over here. At this point, I should mention that staff is recommending that the access from George be closed. And I'm also recommending that through the site plan process, a publicly accessible walkway be established on 164 King Street South, that would be this portion of the property here, to allow for a walkway connection between Heritage Green, located to the north of the site here, and the regional pumping station located to the east of the site. This is in accordance with the Uptown Public Realm strategy. In terms of the current planning framework, the official plan designates 164 and 168 King Street South as commercial, which allows for a mixed-use building. 8 George is designated low-density residential, which allows for low-rise residential type uses, but does not allow for a mixed-use building. This development application was submitted in August 2018, prior to the new zoning bylaw coming into effect. And at that time, 164 and 168 King Street South was zoned C2-12, permitting a mixed-use building with a maximum height of 12 stories. while 8 George Street was zoned General Residence 2A, permitting low-rise residential type uses with a maximum height of 10 meters. In September 2018, Zoning Bylaw 2018-50, also known as the new citywide zoning bylaw, came into effect and zoned the land's Zone Change Application, or ZC, because this application was received and deemed complete prior to Council's approval of the new citywide zoning bylaw. The intent of the ZC zone is to ensure that the zoning regulations applicable to the lands on the day before the effective date of the bylaw continue to apply. This table shows the staff recommended official plan designation for 8 George Street in the purple column, while the existing and requested official plan designations are shown in the gray columns. Through the requested official plan amendment, the applicant is essentially requesting to bring 8 George Street into the primary node and has requested that the same designations be applicable to 8 George Street that are currently applicable to the King Street properties. The zoning bylaw amendment, as recommended by staff, is summarized on this slide. Staff is recommending that 164 and 168 King Street South be rezoned from zone change application to Uptown Mixed Use 30 with site-specific provisions, and that 8 George Street be rezoned from zone change application to Uptown Mixed Use 10 with site-specific provisions. This table breaks down the site-specific zoning provisions as recommended by staff, shown in purple, while the C212 zone and the U230 zone requirements are shown in gray. Staff is recommending that along George Street, a minimum building setback of 4 meters be permitted, whereas 5 meters is required. Along King Street, a minimum building setback of 2.5 meters be permitted, whereas 4 meters is required. With respect to the landscape buffer required adjacent to a low-rise residential area, staff is recommending that the buffer be reduced to an average of 2 meters and no less than 1.5 along the southern property line, whereas along the eastern property line, staff is recommending an average landscape buffer of 1.1 meters and no less than 0.9 meters. And along the same easterly property line, staff is recommending that there be no requirement for a minimum plant material height. Staff is also recommending that one parking space be allowed to project 0.8 meters in front of the established building line along internal King Street to permit structured parking within 15 meters of internal King Street. Also that 6 commercial parking spaces be permitted in lieu of the 9 required spaces for a limited number of commercial uses. These uses would be the ones that typically would generate less of a parking demand than all the other commercial uses within this zone. Also to permit a minimum podium height of 8.75 meters in lieu of the 10.7 meters minimum. Staff is further recommending that the tower step back be reduced to 2 meters along George Street, to 1.4 meters along King Street South, and to 0.5 meters along internal King Street South. To ensure that the 8th floor is terraced, staff is recommending that it be recessed by 1.8 meters from the 7th floor building facade. This will ensure that the building will feel as a 7-story structure from the pedestrian realm adjacent to the building. Finally, staff is recommending that the building height be limited to 10 meters on 8 George Street and to 8 stories on 164 and 168 King Street South. In conclusion, staff is recommending that Council approve official plan amendment number 25 and zoning bylaw amendment Z1818 for 164, 168 King Street South and 8 George Street in accordance with Section 8 of Staff Report IPPW 2020-015. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Looking to council for any questions of staff. Councillor Bonagor.
Thank you, through you, Chair Henry. I just have a few questions.
Sure.
So I noticed in the supplementary reports that engineering services was recommending replacing trees at a ratio of 2:1 for the trees that are on the property now. But given the possible reduction in the landscape buffers, would that still be possible?
Through you, Chair Henry, to the councillor, if it's not possible, they would have to still provide that ratio of trees. They would just have to place it somewhere else. They don't have to be on the site.
Excellent, thank you. And the other question is really regarding the pedestrian interface on that King Street internal road. Sidewalks are proposed for that road there, but I'm just concerned that given where the entryway to the properties are located, that King Street internal might end up resembling and feeling like a private road. It might end up having the feeling within the public realm of being essentially a driveway. So I'm just wondering, how can we rebalance that? Is there a way within site plan that we can just really make sure that we're focusing on the pedestrian environment along King Street internal, just to, especially given that will then link through hopefully
Right.
to the pumping station?
Right. Through you, Chair Henry, to the councillor, I can definitely make note of that, and definitely through the site plan process, what we could potentially do if we want to draw people's attention as they're walking along here, down this way potentially, is to use a similar surface treatment along the sidewalks, and that way, people know that that's the path into the pumping station. All I can really do is take your comments back, and then we can work on it through the site plan process as best we can.
I would appreciate that. Thank you. And my final question, it may not even be for you, given that King Street is a regional road, but given that you are recommending the George Street entrance be removed, that means vehicular access is from King Street onto King Street internal. For vehicles coming south, there is a turn lane that kind of points you towards George Street, but it kind of begins where Kuntz Lane is. So has there been any discussion from the region, or would that come later on whether or not they need to reconfigure those turn lanes?
So
I'm
that
springing
would
this on
be,
you.
again, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, that would be a discussion through the site plan process to see if those turning lanes need to be lengthened in any way. But yeah, that would be the way into the site then. If this is closed, it would be to come in this way.
Looking to council for other questions of staff this time. Seeing none at this time, there may be more later. Thank you, Rita. I will now ask any registered delegations to come forward. We have two, so we'll begin with Mr. Hawkins. When you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Henry, Mayor Jaworski, members of council. I think Rita did an excellent job of summarizing the development, so I'm just going to hit some of the highlights of the development. We're excited to come back before council seeking approval of this development. I know the credit union has been invested in the redevelopment plans for quite some time, dating back to 2017, so to finally get before council for approval is exciting for the credit union, it's exciting for us. We think it's an excellent addition to the Uptown. It's unique in that it offers commercial uses as well as employment uses and residential uses in a smaller format building. So it's not a tower with hundreds of units. It's a smaller boutique style building that has a unique mix of uses, and we think that's going to be a positive addition to the Uptown. We've been working with staff on some of the site plan matters, and that's why one of the reasons there are so many exceptions is because Kuntz Lane has been considered part of King Street, so there's a whole bunch of regulations in the bylaw that get triggered when that suddenly becomes part of King Street. So a number of the site specifics relate to that. We've moved the building, added podium, added step backs, added recessions on the top floor. made a number of changes from when we appeared before council back in January of 2019, all working with staff towards where we are today. We think that's been in a positive direction, and we hope staff feels the same way. We're certainly willing to work with staff and council for providing the access through to the Region's property from the Heritage Green, and look forward to furthering those discussions and working with staff in that regard. With respect to tree plantings, there's certainly lots of opportunities in front of the property. So there's four plus meters really all along most of George Street, 4 meters along King Street, and then there's opportunities back in here. We actually met, myself and Gord Harrison from the credit union met with the neighbor who owns 10 George Street, and we walked all the way around the property and talked about landscaping, and I know she has a number of ideas and things she does want and things she doesn't want, and we certainly are happy to work with her wherever that's possible to incorporate some of the things that she wants to see there. We did lose some parking to accommodate that dreaded hydro transformer, unfortunately. Despite best efforts to locate it elsewhere, that was where they preferred it, because there's a connection that will have to go down the lane towards William Street. So I'm not an electrical engineer, but there was a whole bunch of turns and switches and a whole bunch of reasons why that had to be there. So that's why you see the transformer there, even though normally we wouldn't propose it in a spot like that. We think that further to Rita's answer about identifying the laneway, there's opportunities for council to explore signage as part of the whole public realm plan, to direct people to the pumping station, to direct people to the Heritage Park from William Street. So there's lots of ways to make this feel like a public amenity. I think the park already does to a large extent, but if the sidewalks don't feel like they're part of the laneway, we will work with staff to make sure that they're not felt like they're part of the credit union. Further to your comment there. So I think we've done a number of design perspectives to give council a sense that it really is a ground-related building. The first 2 floors are really distinct from the upper floors, and that's a part and parcel with the 2 different types of uses. The credit union would occupy the first 2 floors, and then the residential units would be above. So there is a break there, and it's a break in use, a break in design, and we think that building relates nicely to the street, both George Street, King Street, and the lane. There's parking that we have to provide for this development, and because of the well on William Street, there's really no opportunity to put it underground. So we've done our best to hide it. It is unfortunately what it is in terms of surface parking, and we'll work with staff through other tools and methods to look at ways to screen that parking, particularly from George Street. It won't be as visible. It won't be visible from King Street, and it will be only visible on the lane when you actually come around the corner. So we'll certainly work with staff to minimize those visible angles. And just in conclusion, we think it's a great development. It's a terrific location. It has access to a number of transit opportunities, but also the Spurline Trail, the Iron Horse Trail. They're both so close by that there's a lot of ways to get around. For someone like Councillor Henry, who doesn't have a vehicle, there's terrific opportunities to get around uptown and Kitchener and all through Waterloo to destinations that you would use on a day-to-day basis. And we think that the building will be a very positive contribution to the uptown. Thank you.
Not sure what subtle pitch Mr. Hawkins was making there, whether it was directly on behalf of the application or whether he was trying to get me to be a credit union member at this location. My bank is closer and on the same line, but always worth trying, I know. Looking to council for questions of Mr. Hawkins, Councillor Bonagor.
Through you, Chair Henry. First of all, I just want to say that it's great to see the credit union continuing to invest in our community. So I know that you've been a great neighbour and a great member of the community, and this is just one more way you're building on that. I do have some questions about the design for you, though, Mr. Hawkins. So first of all, staff are proposing to remove that George Street entrance. That's their recommendation. What impact will that have for the site?
Through you, Chair Henry, to Councillor Bonagor, I think the question you also asked, Rita, about accessing Kuntz Lane from King Street, I think that would be something that we would want to make sure didn't prevent people from accessing the site. So as long as there are no restrictions on someone turning left from King Street into Kuntz Lane to access this property, we'll do our best to work with staff to refine that George Street side.
When I was looking at the floor plans, I saw some internal bicycle storage, which is often something we're asking people to think about. I noticed it's on the second floor, which is also a commercial floor. So is the idea that this would be storage for residents or for commercial or both? Like, who's going to be using that bicycle storage?
Through you, Chair Henry, to Councillor Boniger, I think the idea is normally you wouldn't want to have two different land uses on the same floor for security reasons and access reasons. So our intent would probably be to separate the storage and the bike storage for residential purposes. There will be other opportunities for employees who are working at the credit union to park their bikes, not in that spot.
Thank you. The other one, my other question is really about the apartments themselves. A lot of people across the city and in this ward, they have homes, they're looking to downsize, or their families looking to buy their first home. And many people are struggling to find apartments of the right size, like something that could fit essentially, that could become a family home. Given your prime location on the edge of one of the best known neighbourhoods in the city, I was just wondering if there is an idea or potential to offer some larger units. I see there are 1 bedrooms and a few 2 bedrooms. Is there any idea or potential to maybe combine some of the smaller suites to make a 3 or anything like that?
Again, through you, Chair Henry, I think the 2-bedroom units are 1,000 square feet roughly, with balconies, and some of them would have a terrace. So that's a fair size unit. And when there's a flip side, and I know this is an aspiration of council, and I think you'll probably hear this from lots of developers. When you make the unit larger, inevitably you make the unit more expensive. So there's always a balancing act between providing enough space that it could attract a couple with children, for example, or a child, versus a family of 5 buying $1 million condominium in Waterloo. So you always have to try and balance those objectives, providing housing that someone could actually purchase and achieves an objective in a size for them, but maybe not as big a house as they might buy in Vista Hills or Eastbridge.
1,000 square feet is nothing to sneeze at, though.
No,
so
absolutely.
Oh, your comment there just leads me to my final question. Is there any suggestion or idea of having an affordable housing complement as part of the building?
Again, through you, Chair Henry, I think the affordable housing question will inevitably come up on probably all the developments that Waterloo Council faces, and I think it's a dilemma that not only Waterloo faces, but Kitchener and Cambridge and Waterloo Region. It's not a local issue. It's not a development by development issue. It's a broader objective, and it takes leadership really at the regional and provincial and probably even the federal level at this point in time. So I think if there are programs in place that are available to developers to take advantage of reduced development charges or reduced permit fees or whatever types of incentives that council should explore and offers, then I think you will find that there will be developers who, particularly on larger buildings, which have a bit more flexibility to offer a percentage of their units for that purpose, you might find that there will be interested parties. But when the cost of construction keeps going up and up and up, and trades are in such short supply that you can't find trades, or the trades that you do find cost quite a bit of money locally. The cost to build these buildings is getting, it's not the land actually, it's the cost of building the buildings that's actually increasing faster than the cost of the land. And that's a problem that's difficult to solve without some type of senior government level incentives.
That's understandable, and I thank you for your answer. And I just want to let the credit union representatives in the room know that there are some programs available should you wish to discuss this idea a little bit. There are some very open ears at the city and the region.
Looking to other members of council with questions for the applicant's planner, Councillor Vassar.
Thanks for the presentation. This is just a comment, just to follow up to say leaders come in all shapes and sizes and from the government and the private sector. So I would encourage you, yes, also to be leaders yourselves and come back to council and share how that might look on this proposal or others. So 2 questions primarily related to heritage. So I'm the heritage committee person on council, and I'm interested in bringing back to them some information, your perspective on their recommendation, which is to salvage materials where possible from 168 King Street, and then potentially use that in the creation of a commemorative location on the property. So I'm just curious if you could share a little bit more, if you've talked about that, what that might look like.
Through you, Chair Henry, to Councillor Vasic, I think we would be happy to discuss it with the city's heritage planner and then bring some ideas back to the committee. There might be an opportunity through the walkway connection from the Heritage Green through to the building. That probably makes sense to me, that would be an area we would look at first. And if that wasn't feasible for whatever reason, then we would look at areas that are visible from the public realm, particularly on King Street if possible. Yeah.
Great, thanks. It sounds like you have interest, which is good news. I do have some concerns that the walkway could potentially end up as 2 meters. I know that will all happen in the site plan design, but I'm just curious to hear a little bit more from you about what's your commitment to making it 3 meters, which is sort of the minimum that the city suggests. And if you have thoughts about maintenance for that location. I guess I'm curious for your thoughts. It's not exactly a decision point, but I am also just indicating that I'd like the walkways in the city to, at the very least, meet the minimum standards the city suggests, but then more if possible.
Through you, Chair Henry, in response. So we originally, if you recall, back in January, if I can get my cursor up here, we had proposed a 2-meter walkway along the north side of the parking lot. We had the parking lot shifted slightly to the south. That was because of the floodplain and the region's desire to keep water away from their property and to have positive drainage towards the George Street storm sewer. We had to have the walkway go down, but the parking stay up, and there was a retaining wall. And when we met with staff on a couple of occasions, they expressed a preference that we not do that walkway, and that instead we provide an easement over the 6-meter wide drive aisle. So you would essentially walk along this sidewalk, and then there'd be some type of, as Rita sort of alluded to, a pavement treatment that would show you that walkway effectively continues, not only if you took the lane out to William Street, but also if you came through this property, and that would direct you in time to the region's property, and then the region would grade their property such that they would meet. So that was kind of where we got in our discussions with staff, and we're happy to work with them towards that objective. It does give a little more space. I mean, it's in all likelihood, most of these cars will sort of park and then stay there, and they're not going to be coming and going as frequently because they'd be employees who are working at the credit union for the most part. So you're not going to have tremendous amount of conflict for people using the walkway, but there's ways that we can use signage to let people know that there'll be pedestrians using it as well.
Other questions for Mr. Hawkins? Seeing none this time, thank you very much. My next registered delegation is David Gorski. David? You just
Yeah, I don't have
say your name and city of residence for the record, and then you have 10 minutes.
Hello, everyone. My name is David, and I'm a resident of Uptown Waterloo, as well as a founder of Plan Together, a collaborative map-based urban planning website. I'd like to say a few words about Uptown and about this potential development. I love Uptown. I think it's amazing and unique. In the summer, Having dinner on the public square patio while music plays in the background as the evening sun casts long shadows across the street is a magical experience. But I'd like to focus on the specifics of what makes Uptown so great, because it's not magic. There are certain things that make it a great place. The public square, the local shops, a great variety of restaurants and eateries, the polished streetscape, the feeling of safety. I also love that the LRT goes through a portion of it. It gives the restaurant a very modern, up-and-coming feel. All the ingredients that make Uptown great are enabled by one commonality: population density. Without people nearby, businesses would not survive, the public square would be completely empty, and it would no longer feel as safe. That is why I think we need more housing directly in Uptown, near King Street, and that is why I'm in support of this new development. Inviting more residents to join us will only continue to improve Uptown. More businesses, a more vibrant community, more jobs, and more opportunities. We should not squander the opportunity to make Uptown a world-class public space and block much-needed densification. More technically, I think the development is a great fit for the law and neighborhood. 8 floors is a reasonable height. It has an inoffensive design and is right on the LRT line. The elements requested in the zoning change are necessary. Reduced setbacks and landscape buffers contribute to an urban feel and enable walkability. You can take a look at our favorite old buildings in Uptown. And reducing the required commercial parking is also a necessary step to ensure that the future of Uptown is human-centric. When growing a city, it is important to balance growth, public spaces, commercial, residential, and office space. Keeping that in mind, I believe Uptown would be a better place with this new development and new residents. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Have a good night.
Thank you for coming, David. Questions for David from members of council? No, really appreciate you coming together tonight, and I have popped into your website, at least I can say once or twice in the last while since I saw you on, popped into my feed somewhere, so appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So we have no other registered delegations. Is there anyone else present tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Seeing none. If there are no more delegations, this formal public meeting is concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. Looking to council. Councillor Bonagor, perhaps.
I'm happy to move the motion to approve the application under the staff recommendations.
So you'll have some stuff to read.
I will. Do I read it now? Okay. Whereas Council has considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders, and whereas Council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that Council approves Staff Report IPPW 2020-015, that Council adopts Official Plan Amendment Number 25, OPA 25, as set out in Section 8 of IPPW 2020-015, that Council requests that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo approve Official Plan Amendment 25, OPA 25, that Council approves Zone Change Application Z1818, Your Neighbourhood Credit Union, for 164, 168 King Street South and 8 George Street in accordance with Section 8 of Staff Report IPPW 2020-015.
I understand the mayor seconded that. Comments on the motion? Councillor Bonagor, perhaps?
Yes, indeed. Through you, Chair Henry. I would really like to thank the Neighbourhood Credit Union, MHBC and city staff for working so hard together to bring this proposal to this point. I can tell you from my discussions with residents in that neighbourhood and residents across Ward 7, and as Mr. Gorski said today, people want to share Uptown. We want to have more residents, and we want to do it in developments that help shape a really wonderful public realm. And I think what you've brought here with its height, with the landscaping along the boundaries, with the way that you're working with residents and neighbours and going to be working with staff to try and create a strong public realm that kind of crosses and links what you're building with some heritage parks. This is all a really great piece of city building. And I just want to thank you all for bringing it forward. I think it's going to be a great addition.
Further comments from council? Seeing none, I'll simply add just briefly one to the applicant, Mr. Hawkins. I know at the informal meeting, I know I spoke to the Uptown Public Realm study and the desire for a connection across that path. So I really appreciate folks working to find something that will work. I think for us, looking at what that solution looks like in site plan should compel us from a transportation. So you think about Kuntz Lane as maybe the city's second WNRF, to be able to really, at least for part of it, to continue that kind of treatment across it and make it more consistent. So there may be some work for us to do on our end to make what they're going to do on their end at our behest work well. We I think both need to think a little bit more about that. It certainly is not a high traffic street. And the other thing I'd say to the applicant on this, I know Councillor Bonagor raised it in questions around affordability and housing. I should let the applicant themselves know that at least one of your members, and I'm sure more if they thought about it, are telling us that surely a co-op would think like a co-op in terms of housing as well. And so I would encourage you to think about how affordability and continuity can play into this. I'm sure that's a conversation that some of your members will be having with you anyways. And from a planning rules perspective and where we sit in policy, that's where the conversation lies, because we have no tools at this time, nor have we been granted many, to compel that conversation, but I'm sure it will happen anyways. And I think it's worthwhile for that to be a strong internal conversation, because affordable housing and a range and mix of housing prices and types, this is a large component of that, is essential for Uptown to continue to thrive and succeed for everyone. And I'm glad that the co-op is playing a role in investing, and I hope that it strongly considers the positive role it can play in making sure that Uptown does work for everybody. So I appreciate the thought that could come from all of that. With that, I'll take the vote. All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you very much. Consideration of notice of motion given at a previous meeting. We have none. Notice of motion, I've been informed of none and I see none. Communications and correspondence, we have none. Unfinished business, there is none. Questions? Are there questions? Mayor Jaworski has lots of questions.
Well, actually, two questions, and I'm well prepared thanks to Councillor Henry, because these are her questions.
I was going to say, that's twice as many questions as you'd, 2 times as many. That's a multiple thing. That's a bad. I'm already off tonight. Go ahead.
So, and this is to our CAO. So, in light of the presence of COVID-19 in our area and the city's desire to be well prepared, our staff working on a business continuity plan for the city corporation. And then, what is the city's role within the preparedness of the broader community?
Through you, Chair Henry. Thanks, Mayor, for those questions. I'll start with the first. The answer is yes. We're actually updating our past business continuity plans just to be prepared for this current situation, which is very fluid, as you've seen in the media, and is rapidly developing in different ways. So we are preparing business continuity, and that's really focused on our operations as a city, just what we would be doing if we're limited with some resources in situations like the one we're experiencing now. So that's it's a preparedness document. It helps give us guidance and processes around what services would continue and which ones might be limited or shut down in some cases. So that's a step that we're doing now, and over the next couple of weeks, again, we're using some historical documents that we've had in place in the past for other types of situations, and the business continuity documents will be updated for the City of Waterloo. We are part of a regional government, as you know, and public health actually takes the lead on the health of COVID-19. So from a health perspective, all of our guidance comes from regional public health, and they're regularly updating us, myself, the fire chief, Ms. Patel have been actively involved over the last week, getting a number of updates and sharing those with our staff as well. But the most reliable and most current information is available directly from the region's website on public health. And they too, in turn, take guidance from the province and the federal government. So again, our role is really around business continuity and just preparing our documents to ensure that we can continue to run the operations of the city.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council? Is there any new business, Council? There is enactment of bylaws. Someone should move those. Councillor Freeman and Councillor Bodley will second those. All those in favor? That's carried. And we have adjournment. Who would like to adjourn? Councillor Bonagor, Councillor Freeman, all those in favor? That's carried. And we're concluded.